Hey all, and welcome to another tutorial. These coconut palm trees take a while to make, and you'll need some special tools to get the same results. But sometimes, to get great results, we need to spend a bit of money getting the right tools for the job. This is the Brother Scan and Cut, and at $290 it's not the cheapest, but there are a number of different craft cutting machines you could use, costing between $100 right up to a couple $1,000s. But if you want great results with little effort, then this is definitely the way to go, not to mention craft cutting machines can be used for a wide range of modelling projects, not just palm trees. Before we start using the cutting machine, we need to design a palm leaf. I use Illustrator to create my leaf, but you can use any other similar program. You can even draw a leaf on a piece of paper and scan it into your computer if that's what you prefer. I looked at a bunch of coconut leaves on Google, and once I was happy I started creating the leaf using very basic shapes until I got the look I wanted, making use of the copy and paste function. Just be sure to space the individual leaflets far enough apart because the cutting machine can only do so much, and if the leaves are too closely spaced you may find your machine has trouble. If you'd like to download this leaf and use it on your own cutting machine, check out bouldercreekrailroad.com and I'll add the download files there. A huge plus for this particular machine is it has its own canvas design program. You can import files you've already created, like what we have done with our leaf, or you can even build them from scratch right here. Next, it's just a matter of resizing the leaf to the desired length. Then using Ctrl+C, then Ctrl+V, we can copy and paste all the leaves we need. Now this is where the magic happens. We simply press the download button and then send the design straight to the machine using Wi-Fi. Before I start cutting, I need to prepare the paper. Cutting paper alone, especially with such intricate cuts that we need for making our palm leaf, will end in a mess of ripped and torn pieces of paper. For very fine cuts, we need to give the paper a little more strength. To do this, I use peel and stick clear vinyl. Basically the stuff you find at the supermarket or office supply store that is usually used to cover school books. Cut a piece big enough to cover an A4 piece of paper and carefully work your way along, sticking the vinyl to one side of the paper, trying to avoid bubbles. Cut away the excess and your paper is now ready to use. The scan and cut machine comes with a standard tack adhesive mat, however for regular paper I used the low tack mat, which I had to purchase separately. With the shiny side facing up, I position the paper and use the spatula also supplied to help press the paper down and get it to stick. Now we're ready to cut some leaves. Load the mat into the machine and then select the download from Wi-Fi symbol. I'll also mention I calibrated the machine beforehand using the instructions, which was very straightforward. Now we start cutting and sit back while the scan and cut does all the hard work. It took about a minute per leaf, so all up on this sheet it took nearly 26 minutes. The spatula is used to help remove the leaves from the mat. Just take your time because it's possible to ruin some of the leaves as you try to remove them from the mat. Stems are added to each individual leaf using 28 gauge Florists wire. To straighten the wire, I place one end in a drill and hold the opposite end with pliers. Then simply turn the drill for a few seconds while pulling the wire tightly and you'll have some very straight wire. I estimated that I'd need about 28 leaves per tree, so I cut 28 stems about 2 inches long. With the shiny side of each leaf facing up, I line them up ready for the stems to be added. The stems are firstly glued into position using super tack glue. You'll only need a very small amount of glue and then press the stem onto the leaf approximately 3/4 the way up the leaf. I do this for each leaf. In preparation for painting, I dab a small amount of super tack glue on the base of each stem and press it into a length of foam. The glue on the bottom helps prevent the leaf from twisting around whilst trying to apply the paint. But before we paint, there is one more step I do to prepare the leaf. I run a bead of super glue along the stem of each leaf. This gives the leaf extra strength because later when we bend and shape the leaves, they have a tendency to peel away from the stem if there's no super glue. Painting is very easy, just a light coat of Rust-Oleum Satin Eden, the perfect palm leaf colour. Try to avoid overspraying because the leaves are so close together, it's possible for the paint to span the small gap, basically fusing the leaves together. Just apply a few very light coats as opposed to one heavy coat. The trunk is almost identical to the trunk I made in the previous palm video. Using 2.7 diameter electrical wire, I cut a length of about 6 inches, but that will depend on how tall you want your palm tree. Then I stripped the bottom inch to create a pin for installing the tree into the scenery, and again with the florist wire, I wrap the trunk from bottom to top, leaving larger gaps here and there to create more detail along the trunk. It seems time consuming making the trunks, but after you've made one or two they come together quite fast and only take a minute or two to make. The top of the tree is formed with air drying modelling clay. You'll only need a small amount, then just press and form it into a bulb shape on the top of the tree. Then after several minutes, but before it's completely dry, I use a pin to create holes where each palm leaf stem will press into, gradually working from bottom to top. I hold the pin on an angle and count out about 28 holes, doing my best to have them evenly spaced. Blending the trunk detail is done using gesso. I found applying the paste using a very fine brush works well, and I apply it in light coats, brushing vertically along the trunk. I ended up applying 4 plain white coats of gesso, and then for the final 5th coat, I mixed a little Vallejo light mud and Vallejo tan earth and applied it just the same. Just be sure to apply it very thin on the top of the tree, so you don't fill in the small holes for the leaves. But if you do fill in some holes, just clear them out with the pin again. For additional texture, I applied a very light coat of firstly Jasper spray paint, followed by some June spray paint. You can see how lightly it's applied, it's almost not noticeable. For a little added detail on the leaves, I very subtly apply Vallejo deck tan to the tips of the leaves. You don't need to coat every single leaf tip, but just enough so you know it's there. As the paint dries, it will darken and blend in a bit more. Jute twine is used to simulate some of the fibrous material and dead leaves that hang below the palm leaves. I just tease it out and separate the fibres, then lay it down on the mat. Next, I use some spray adhesive and lightly coat the very top of the trunk. And finally, roll the trunk across the twine so it sits just below where the first leaves will be placed. Any stray pieces can be removed with tweezers. Each leaf is carefully bent along its length to give a natural hanging palm leaf shape. Then the leaflets are pressed down and teased out slightly so they are not all perfectly aligned. Trim away the excess stem, leaving only just enough to press the stem into the trunk. Next, just apply a small amount of super glue to the tip and then press the leaf into position on the trunk. I find it much easier to start at the bottom and work your way up. It's a time-consuming process, but the results are worth the effort once you have all the leaves in place. For added strength, I'll add additional super glue at the base of each stem once the leaf is in place. And you may find some don't sit as well in the holes, which means you might need to hold it there for 30 seconds or so as the super glue sets. This is a coconut tree, so we'll need to make some coconuts. This is easy enough using our air drying modelling clay. Just grab a very small piece and roll it between your fingers to make a coconut. Depending on which scale you're working in, I've found most coconuts on a tree are about as big as a person's head, so you can use that as a gauge on how big to make them. As for colour, this is simply some Vallejo golden olive thinned with a wet paintbrush and painted over the coconuts. Just make sure you separate them as they dry, otherwise they'll stick together like glue. Finally, all we need to do is glue our coconuts onto the tree. Using the Super Tack glue, dab a small amount onto each coconut and then set it into position on the tree just below the palm leaves. And that's it, you now have a coconut tree. If you're wondering why I go to all the effort making the trunk when I could easily use a piece of dowel or balsa wood, this is why. Palms don't always have straight trunks, and by making the trunk the way I did, I'm able to bend and manipulate the trunk into whatever shape I want. And there you have it, a great looking palm tree. Easy to make with the right equipment. If you're enjoying these videos and would like to help support them, be sure to check out my Patreon page. Cheers and thanks for watching.